In the 90s, many of us grew up playing video games. Whether you were a Nintendo kid or a Sega kid, we grew up playing these games and falling in love with these characters. In the 90s is when we finally started getting action figures based on these video games. And there was a lot. So on this episode, we're going to explore 12 of some of the most awesome video game action figures. Welcome back, guys. It's Thomas, and on this episode we're going to look at some of those video games that later went on to give us some of the coolest action figures ever. And when I first came up with this topic, I thought, wow, there's really not that many video game toys from the 90s, but I was wrong. And just from the research I was doing, there's more than 20 action figure lines based off video games. So I'm actually going to do something different. This is going to be a two-part episode, and today we're going to primarily focus on the first 12, and we're going to go from the years 1993 up until 1997. So if you make it to the end of this video and you feel inclined to tell me I missed something, stick around for next week because we're going to go from 1997 to 1999. But let's start with the beginning half of the decade and talk about some of those awesome 90s video game action figures. One of the first video games that I remember playing was Super Mario Brothers on the NES, and I always wanted toys of the characters, but there really wasn't much. There was some little rubber toys. It wasn't until we got the amazing movie, the Super Mario Brothers movie. I know nobody really likes that movie. I truly don't either, but it is a fun time capsule starring John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins. It still is kind of fun and goofy to watch if you go back. However, they did give some awesome Mario and Luigi action figures. And a company called Ertl, who is primarily known for making toy trucks, and probably one of the only lines that I ever had of Ertl's was Thomas the Tank Engine. Of course, Thomas had Thomas the Tank Engine toys, but this lineup of figures was awesome. They produced a Goomba, Koopa, Iggy and Spike, the two goons, and then of course the two main characters, Mario and Luigi. I love their colors, with Mario in the bright red and blue, Luigi with the blue and green. This toy line even came with a playset, the Devo Chamber, and had a really awesome vehicle with the squad car. Now, while I know most people don't remember the movie fondly, I do think that these toys were pretty cool. I do wish I had them back in the day. 1993, Street Fighter 2 came out for arcades, Super Nintendo, and the Sega Genesis. And Hasbro gave us some of our first Street Fighters, part of the G.I. Joe line. I know a lot of older G.I. Joe fans were not cool with Street Fighter entering the Joe universe, but for me, this was a way to get kids back into G.I. Joes, because now I had those new Street Fighter figures and I wanted to break out some of my other G.I. Joes that would match in scale. But there were 12 figures in all. Some of the figures had some reuse. I know Balrog used a lot of pieces from Big Boa. Chun-Li figure with the wide hips was also reused for the Scarlet Ninja Force, but it was still a great line. I remember they would do the Player 2 variants that would come with vehicles, and one of my favorites was Blanca and Chun-Li coming with the Beast Blaster, which was a lot of reuse from the Dreadnought's Thunder Machine. And this line did come with a playset, the Dragon Fortress. It was probably one of the worst G.I. Joe playsets ever made. And then figures for the Street Fighter movie would later come out in the same G.I. Joe style. So these might have been some of my first video game action figures, and I still collect Street Fighter to this day with Jada Toys. And one of my favorite things to do is to display those Street Fighter figures with my G.I. Joe Classified. So it's just like being a kid again. Next up, we have Tycho's Double Dragon. Now, I remember playing this on the NES, and it was probably one of the few multiplayer games where me and my brother would get along and work together. Now, there was a cartoon that came out, and I remember it being very different from the game, but it was still cool, and it did provide us a line of action figures. We got 6 different action figures, including our heroes Billy and Jimmy, and probably one of the coolest villains, the Shadow Master. All the figures came with translucent weapons, and they did produce some really awesome vehicles for this line. I will say one of the disappointing things is that some of the other supporting villains didn't quite look like the villains in the game, but it was still a fun toy line. Hasbro, seeing the popularity of adding Street Fighter characters to G.I. Joe, wanted to do it again, so they added Mortal Kombat. And just like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat was all over arcades and Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, so they released a line of 13 action figures. The only thing that was different is that these Mortal Kombat figures did not have any G.I. Joe branding on them, but this was also around the time of the introduction of Ninja Force, so it definitely was fun to put your Street Fighter, your Mortal Kombat, and your Ninja Force all together in one collection. Making some of the super popular characters like Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, and Sonya Blade. We also got a giant figure as in Goro, and he came with 4 arms. That was really cool. But my favorite part of collecting these Mortal Kombat figures were the different colored ninjas. You had Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Smoke, and the one that I missed out on was Reptile. He came with the Dragon Boat. Never got my hands on him. He was also a mail away, but just having all those ninjas displayed probably would have been really cool. Storm Collectibles was making modern day Mortal Kombat. Now you have McFarlane that is making them. However, I do wish that either Hasbro or J-Dub would take the line so I can also display them with my G.I. Joe and Street Fighter characters. Primal Rage was an awesome video game that released in 1994 for Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and it was basically a bunch of apes and dinosaurs in a fighting game, and it was really cool. Nothing like it at the time. They used a lot of stop motion animation for the character design, which actually translated really well to action figures. Playmates released a line of 7 different action figures, and they just looked different than anything else at the time. They were these big, roided out monsters. You had 2 ape characters and other dinosaurs. They had bright colors, rooted hair, and they were just a lot of fun. So that's definitely one that I think could use a reboot nowadays, but Primal Rage was really cool. Any other fighting game that was not Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat was just that, another fighting game, but Virtua Fighter that played in arcade and later Sega Saturn actually did come out with some action figures. And I'll admit, I know absolutely nothing about this game or the characters, but when the designers went to make these toys, they went for extreme accuracy to the point where they actually gave them that triangular polygonal design. So for that, I think it's pretty cool, even though, again, I have no attachment to this franchise. I think Storm Collectibles is making them now with updated articulation and design, but back in the day, it would have been pretty weird to get those characters that literally look like they came off of your screen. Megaman was a super popular NES game. I remember playing it years later for PlayStation and on other systems, but I also do remember the cartoon. And from that cartoon, we were able to get some pretty sweet action figures. In 1995, Bandai released a set of 10 action figures. You had the whole assortment of villains. You had Mega Man, of course, and one of the coolest figures I think they made was Rush. Luckily today we are getting more Mega Man figures again from Jada Toys, so it's just super exciting to see them on the shelf. I remember those figures looked a little taller, so Mega Man looked older. I like the Jada Toys design where Mega Man looks a little younger, a little smaller, a little more childlike. I remember going over to a friend's house and playing Earthworm Jim on the Super Nintendo. It was such a cool game, but we got action figures for Earthworm Jim from Playmates. This was an assortment of 9 figures. You got multiple variants of Earthworm Jim, some of the villains like Psychro and Hentrat. My favorite was always Peter Puppy because he came with a small version of him, and then he came out with the monster version of himself. And they came out with a vehicle helicopter called the Pocket Rocket, which I'm not sure how that didn't piss off parents back in the day. And we have seen Earthworm Jim figures throughout the years. I think most recently Premium DNA has put one up for pre-order. I don't know if anyone's gotten it yet, but we'll see. I guess my first introduction to import figures would have been Bandai's Final Fantasy VII action figures. It was super popular on the first PlayStation, and I do remember getting at least one of these figures. I had Vincent, but you had the whole cast of characters. Barrett was one of my favorite designs with the gun arm, and then of course the main hero Cloud. And these were limited articulation. They pretty much just moved at the hips and their arms moved. If there's ever another figure line that I'd like to see made today, I would love to see another company take a crack at it. Now, Resource is a toy company you're going to see pop up on not this list, but the next one, because they produced a lot of video game action figures. First one that we'll be talking about was in 1997 when they produced Duke Nukem action figures. Duke Nukem popularized the first-person shooter, I would say probably more than Doom. Don't quote me on that, but popular on PC, Super Nintendo, PlayStation, and they produced amazing action figures. There were 6 different action figures released in total, 3 variants of Duke Nukem, and then 3 villains. Battlelord, Octobrain, and my favorite was Pig Cop. Now, while not many characters, the sculpt, the paint, the The weaponry on these figures just looked super awesome, probably ahead of its time, and they were great figures. So again, I don't know any company that's making these now, but I would love to see them have a comeback. And I've mentioned Pokemon in my last episode, but in 1997, everyone was playing with the cards or playing it on their Game Boy. I was more interested in the action figures. And you had Hasbro making action figures, Takara, and it was really fun. You had these Pokemon, they really didn't move, they were just little slug figures. They came with Pokeballs though, that was awesome. Then they also did trainer packs where you would get to actually collect the trainers that came with the Pokemon. They did make a lot of Pokemon. I don't know any kid that did collect them all because there would be tons of those and they're very expensive. And we're gonna end this list off with probably one of the worst action figures I've ever seen, even till this day, and that goes to Toy Biz Video Game Superstars Tomb Raider. I remember playing all the Tomb Raider games on PlayStation and always wanted a Lara Croft action figure. And when Toy Biz started making Video Game Superstars, that was finally our chance. And then I saw what it looked like and I didn't really want it anymore. From the neck down, this is actually a really awesome figure. It had everything you could have wanted in Tomb Raider's design, the teal tank top, the shorts, the boots, the gun holders, everything. It was just when you got to her face where they really messed up. So this release wasn't great, but we did get some better ones in the future. Playmates released some deluxe Lara Crofts that had some great sculpt, great paint, not super articulated. And then they would do the Adventures of Lara Croft series, which came with a more video game accurate looking Lara Croft and in her different outfits, and it would always come with a diorama base. I had the original one that came with like the tomb and the tiger, had that on display for a while. That was pretty awesome. Probably the most exciting news in the last couple of weeks is that we are getting Lara Croft from Tomb Raider entering G.I. Joe Classified. So there's a brand new Lara Croft figure heading our way very soon. All right guys, that does it with this list of awesome 90s video game action figures. Again, don't tell me I forgot anything that is post 1997. If I forgot something that's between 93 and 97, let me know down in the comments. I'm sure you will. But we are going to do part 2 next week. We're going to wrap up the 90s because there's a whole lot more video game action figures that came in just the last couple of years. So hope you enjoyed this one, folks. If you did, hit like and subscribe. I'd truly appreciate it. And until the next episode, we'll catch you next time.